Hey friends, Miss Silva here. I'm sorry that I can't be with you today. I am at home sick, trying to get some rest. But I do want to walk you through the things you're going to be doing while I'm gone. We're going to be starting on a little bit of watercolor, and in the next couple of minutes, I'm going to walk you through how to do some exercises and how to learn some basics. All right, let's get our materials together first. You'll need 2 of the half sheets of watercolor paper from up front. On the side counter in each of the table island boxes, there will be watercolors for everyone. There will be a crayon for everyone. There should be little containers of salt that you can share. There will also be nice brand new palettes. And then every table should have 2 or 3 water cups, and you'll need to fill it about 1.5 inches full of water so you can share with the person at your table, probably right next to you, and one of the brushes. Make sure you have all these things set up. All right, we'll start with one piece of paper in front of us, and I'm actually going to turn it to be vertically oriented, and I'm going to move my things so that I can access them really easily. And the first thing I'd like you to do is on the top half, I want you to make a rectangle, and you'll split it into 8 sections as best you can. Doesn't have to be a perfect rectangle at all. We're using crayons because they're waxy, and the wax and the water won't mix, so it will help keep our watercolors from getting everywhere. Now, with your watercolor brush and a normal amount of liquid on it, you'll pick any color you want, get the brush wet in the watercolor cake, and then you'll just make an even shade over most of your square. Make sure you're always rinsing your brush between boxes. What you've just made is called a wash, where everything is about the same. Next up, you're going to clean off your brush, and with clear water, go over the paper. You shouldn't be able to see anything because your brush should be clean. You'll then take whichever color you like and just add some dots here and there. Should be kind of a splotchy color. This is called wet on wet. The next one we'll do is very similar to wet on wet. So start with one color as a wash, any color you want. Clean your brush, choose another color, and add dots on your already wet wash. This is like spots on wet. It's okay if they blended together like mine did. In our next box over, we'll make sure our brush is nice and clean. Choose any color and make a band at the top. Then make sure your brush is clean again. Start with clear water at the bottom and move towards the top where you've made the band. Okay, they should pull into each other and you'll have a gradient. We're going to move to our left-hand box on the second row, and I'm going to do something very similar to the gradient where I'll make one band of color at the top. I'll clean off my brush, make another band of color at the bottom, clean my brush again, and then use clear water to mix them together. This is a 2-color gradient. Next up, you want to make sure your brush is very dry. I like to squeeze the water out of my brush over my water cup with my fingertips, just like this. You'll then take your brush in any color, just going to drag it along lightly. And for this next technique, it's really important that your brush is as parallel to the table as possible. And so the way you're going to do that, I'll show you on this extra piece of paper I have, right? Instead of painting like this, you're going to bring your brush parallel to the paper. And you can tell here I'm getting kind of a dry look with a lot of texture. We're going to call this one dry brush. Next up is one of my favorites. You can make a wash over the entire box. Ooh, that's very deep, dark purple. I'm going to rinse my brush so it's clean, and I'm going to squeeze all the water out of it again, just like I did when I did dry brush. I'm squeezing all the water out of it, and with your dry brush, you're going to scoop up the water and the color. Now, there's no real way to erase with watercolor, but this is about as close as you're going to get if you make a mistake. Again, I'm going to repeat that process where I'm cleaning my brush out, I'm squeezing the extra water, and I'm going to lift up my excess paint and water. Again, you're never going to get all of the paint up, but I would say that this, if I'm trying to coat it with something else, is way easier to cover than this dark purple at the top. For our last box, I'm going to do spots on wet, but you can choose any technique. I'm going to clean my brush. I'll add a second color. And now I'm going to take the salt, and I barely need any, and I'm going to sprinkle a tiny bit of salt onto my square. The salt is going to absorb the water in the watercolor paint at a different rate than the paper, leaving behind its crystal shape. It won't look cool automatically, but check back into this square in about 10 minutes when it's dried a little more, and it will look very cool. Now that all of my techniques are done and looking good, I'm going to move my paper, and I'm actually going to be working in this bottom part now. And you'll also be needing your palette, so make sure you have that handy. And as best you can, you are going to draw a circle. You don't have to trace anything, don't worry about it too much. We're just practicing. We're going to split this into 6 different parts. So I like to do that by making an X. And remember, I'm pressing hard because I want the wax to repel my watercolor. And then I'm going to just cut it in half. And you should have 6 different pieces of pie now. Now I know that our watercolor palettes have secondary colors in them, but today we're really going to practice on mixing our own secondary colors. So I want you to start with red. And you can do a gradient, or you can just make a wash. I'm going to try to make a gradient. So I'm going to rinse my brush out and then try to drag with clear water down to the center. Looking kind of gradienty, but not too much. All right, there's red. Make sure you're cleaning out your brush every time. If your water cup has gotten kind of murky, make sure you're rinsing it and putting fresh water in. I'm going to choose yellow now, and I'm going to skip one and add it into my next piece of pie. Attempt to make another gradient. Oh, that one went a little better. Not so much. Oh well. I'm going to rinse. I'm going to choose blue now. And I'm skipping one and going over here. Going to attempt to make another gradient. Clear water. It's looking okay. It's probably my best. All right, now that I have my primaries in, I'm going to be mixing my secondary colors. My secondary colors are going to be a mixture of the color here and the color here into my blank piece of pie. So first I'm going to choose yellow, and to get the yellow from the little cup to my palette, I'm going to just tap it in. So I picked up the paint and I'm again just tapping it into the little dish. I'm going to rinse my brush, and red is a much stronger value than yellow, so I'm only going to need a teeny bit, and I'll mix it in. Then I will paint in between. You can adjust your secondary colors, like if that's a little bit not reddish enough, you can add some more. Ooh, maybe that's too much now. It's a nice strong red orange. I'm okay with it. All right. Next up, I'm going to be mixing yellow and blue to make green. So I'm making sure my brush is really clear. I'm going to pick up some yellow again. Yellow is our lightest value, and so we'll be needing a little bit more of that than blue. Rinsing out my brush, I'm just going to dip it into the blue ever so little and then mix it up. And I have a nice looking green, so I'm going to add my green in between the two colors that make green. All right, rinsing out my brush. My last secondary color will be purple, which is made up of blue and red. We're going to put it right here. I'm going to start with red this time. And I'm just going to tap a little bit into my cup here. I'm going to rinse. Just a tiny bit of blue and mix it in. And there's your color wheel. For independent work time in class today, you'll need your second half sheet of watercolor paper, you'll need a pencil, you'll need your crayon, and you'll need your palette. At the front, there is a black box full of all different kinds of references. They're all sea creatures. I'd like to stick with the sea creature theme today and pick whichever one speaks to you, right? So I'm going to be drawing this octopus as best I can. I'm going to start in pencil first, okay? I would sketch out very lightly, as light as I can, for about 15 minutes. We want 15 minutes of good draw time, and in that time, you should be able to draw in pencil and then trace your work with a crayon. So here is my traced with crayon octopus. And what I'm going to be asking you to do is you are going to be including all of the different watercolor techniques we practiced at the beginning of class. You'll do all of those on your sea creature. Your sea creature should be about as big as your hand, okay? The bigger it is, the easier it will be to include these different types of watercolor techniques. I don't really care about the colors, whether they're real or imagined, but I should be seeing all of these different watercolor techniques. You can even include them onto the background. We'll start cleaning up this project about 10 minutes before class ends. You need to make sure your name is in the lower right-hand corner of both your test sheet as well as your sea creature. If your test sheet is still wet, you should put it in the drying rack along with your sea creature. If your test sheet is dry, you're welcome to put it into your sketchbook. Your sea creature should definitely be on the drying rack for your class period, and your box with all of the tools that you were using should be back on the side counter. It's very important that your palette gets washed. It's also very important that your paints get stored face up, okay? If they get stored sideways or upside down, because this paint is still kind of wet, it will ruin the paint. It will all fall out and everyone will be bummed. Please put the lid on the salt so it doesn't get everywhere. And when you go to put your clean paintbrush away, please make sure that the paintbrush part is always facing up. Otherwise, they will dry like this. And you know how you always kind of get bummed when you have to paint with a paintbrush that's curved. So in order to keep our paintbrushes nice, let's keep them brush side up, please, okay? I hope that you've had fun. Let's reconnect on Friday, and I can't wait to see your finished sea creatures.